Good morning, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. The title of our conference, The Future of Criminal Justice in Kazakhstan from Humanization to Change Management. And I announced our conference open. So let me give you some general info. We work in a panel session mode. The speakers have already taken their seats. Let me introduce our speakers. Chairman of the Supreme Court of Kazakhstan, Asanov Jakub Kazhmanovich. Deputy Prosecutor General of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Akhmedjanov Marat Muratovich. Minister of Interior of Kazakhstan, Kasimov Kalmukhambet. And strategic leader of the EUCJ project, Mr. Bill Mazer. So let me remind you once again that we work in this kind of panel session mode. There will be small presentations of the speakers, there will be short discussions, and there will be a Q&A session as well. Myself and Saulia will be moderating the session. So, distinguished participants of this conference, truly, we are hosting this conference in a kind of unconventional way. It's being streamed and translated online on several television channels and on several social media accounts of your organization. And to that end, we ask you to use the microphones and to make sure that you have headphones. In case you need translation, please check your headphones. There is simultaneous translation provided. Also, a small remark to turn off your phones, because they will be creating some noise for the translation purposes. So let us start our conference in order to revise and to have the generalized review of the work that we did. And let me start from a short video, which I hope help us lift our spirits and gain and kind of understand fully this ceremonial moods of this EU-funded project. So let's run the video. The world around us changes. The business technologies, as well as how the state works, changes as well. The public sector keeps on asking itself, what should be the public administration in the area of new reality? We also want to ask the question, what should be the criminal justice in Kazakhstan? The EUCJ project is a project unique by its scale that has been financed by the European Union. Starting in 2015, the project has worked with all public authorities who are involved in the criminal justice. This is the very first project that has proposed to the Supreme Court, General Prosecution and Ministry of Kazakhstan and Profile Academies its expert support in the field of institutional changes. In 2017, the General Prosecution of Kazakhstan has announced the launch of a change program with the purpose of creating a prosecution of a new format. As a result, a series of some significant changes have happened that have been reflected in the new law on prosecution. The work of the project office has been launched, and joint projects such as the Legal Services Center toward the society without torture. Staffing and communication changes have been introduced. After the work with the General Prosecution, at the end of 2017, the project, the EUCJ, has started working with the Ministry of Interior. The working group, consisting of 14 Ministry of Interior staff who then turned into a project management office, have formed a vision about the modernization of police, has developed the strategy and identified 27 projects. The partnership with the Supreme Court has led to establishing a project management office and development of 7 programs on development of the judiciary, as well as the Supreme Court's communication strategy. Starting in 2015, together with the Penal Committee, we've been searching for the best model of Kazakhstani probation. Within the framework of joint pilot project, for the first time, the risk assessment of the perpetrators and offenders have been tested, as well as probation officers' interaction with the court have been checked. To support the change program, the EUCJ has conducted large-scale sociological and empirical studies. More than 60 highly qualified experts have contributed to development of change programs in state bodies. The newest equipment to use the new methodologies of work and education have been procured for the Penal Committee, Academies of Law Enforcement Authorities, and Kostana Academy of the Ministry of Interior. EUCJ was the first one to propose the effective mechanism of change management, having given given up the fragmented initiatives, we have used such approaches as management, change management, and project management, development of policy on the evidence-based development of policy, data-based decision-making, human rights, horizontal cooperation, and service-oriented approach. EUCJ thanks its partners for productive 3 years of work and wishes further successful changes for the sake of the country's future. Distinguished colleagues, participants of this conference, let me give you floor to the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Roman Yurievich Vasilenko, for his welcome speech. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Kazakhstan, I would like to welcome you all here. Like I said, welcome to this meeting. On behalf of the Ministry, let me express my gratitude to the European Union and the delegation of the European Union in Kazakhstan for the practical implementation of the Enhancing Criminal Justice in Kazakhstan project. As a result of the joint work of EUCJ participants and members, a strong impetus for further implementation of systemic reports have been given. The trust of general public to courts and law enforcement has increased, as well as the adherence to rule of law at all levels have strengthened as well. Let me underscore that in the last 3 years, within the framework of the EUCJ project, a lot has been done. Comprehensive social rehabilitation, resettlement of individual of ex-convicts have been devised, as well as action plan to improve legal norms in the field of domestic violence have been developed. The methodology of change management have been added to the Kazakhstan Strategic Development Plan covering the period till 2025, and some other significant achievements have been made. We're happy to state that the EUCJ project has helped to acquire necessary skills and toolkits to those who've been receiving at the receiving end of the project, which are responsible for gradual implementation of positive initiatives and transformations in the criminal justice system of Kazakhstan. Distinguished participants, our country pays particular attention to forming of a contemporary modern judiciary that conforms to fundamental reforms initiated by the President Nursultan Nazarbayev, including in the field of rule of law and activity and performance of law enforcement agencies. As international experience shows, the main goal of any effective judiciary should be an independent and professional judiciary branch of power, just and fair and accessible justice. At the same time, it's important to secure the positive support of the society and assessing the efficiency of judiciary and law enforcement system, as well as to enhance the legal literacy of the general public. That was the main focus of the project. The head of state, in his presentation, in his speech on the 7th Congress of Judges of Kazakhstan in November 2016, noted that people shouldn't run around the corridors of the authorities and the different agencies looking for solutions for their problems for months and years. Should the law be broken, individuals should go to court and find a safeguard and protection of his rights and freedom, the way it's done in the whole civilized world. In this context, the EUCJ project has helped to strengthen the efficiency of fundamental reforms that are conducted in our country and which continues to develop as democratic, secular, and legal state, where the state policy is based on respect for human rights and freedoms. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a very fruitful work. Given the topics and given the high-quality composition of today's meeting, today's event, I am confident that we can expect very interesting discussions and very interesting presentations summarizing the results of this project, which will serve as foundation for further continuation of collaboration as well as implementation of new projects in this field. Thank you. Thank you, Roman Yurievich. Well, we would also like to note the fact and to welcome here the newly appointed ambassador, head of EU delegation, His Excellency Sven on Carlson. Let's give a round of applause to the EU ambassador, His Excellency. And for the welcome speech, on behalf of the European Union, we would like to invite the head of cooperation department of the European Union delegation in Kazakhstan, Mr. Johannes Steenberg-Meten. Please, the floor is yours now.
Honorable participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to welcome you on behalf of the EU delegation in Kazakhstan to this final conference on the EU project on strengthening criminal justice in Kazakhstan. First, allow me briefly to recall that the EU-funded project with a budget of some 5.5 million euro started 3 years ago, and that we today will be taking stock of the results achieved through the many project activities undertaken and their sustainability. This event will allow us not only to consider the deliverables of the project, but more importantly, hear about how the legacy of the project has become everyday practice in the criminal justice system, how the government is taking ownership of the reforms launched by the project. I am expecting that today's panel of speakers will provide testimonies to this fact. At this very critical moment, I'm happy to note that all stakeholders of the project are present and are prepared to discuss the future of criminal justice in Kazakhstan beyond the project. More importantly, we at the EU delegation were pleased to learn that the EUCJ modality of change also has been used for change work within the government under its country strategic plan of development 2025. Within the EUCJ project, a unique approach of providing experts on a variety of issues associated with criminal justice was used. The positive results of this approach have been recorded in the form of changes in the criminal process, criminal statistics, human resources, handling domestic violence, prison reform, and a number of other areas. Specifically, with the assistance of the project, legal justice centers were opened throughout the country. The first probation reports were produced for the courts, and project management offices were established in the prosecutor's office, Supreme Court, and the Ministry of Interior. In the course of the project implementation, I had the chance to meet the top managers of all stakeholders and to witness how their ideas are spreading in the system and becoming a reality. It has been an exciting process to follow, and we at the EU delegation are proud of having enabled and been part of it. I believe that the main results of the projects are manifested in the institutional strengthening of the criminal justice actors, the clear separation of powers and duties between judges and prosecutors is perhaps the best evidence of this. We welcome the fact that sanctioning powers have been transferred from prosecutors to judges, and we welcome the specialization of prosecutors on criminal justice and narrowing down of general oversight. Another development we are proud of is the establishment of a fully fledged probation system and an enhanced humanization of criminal justice, which resulted in a steady decrease in the prison population and the closure of some 8 prisons in Kazakhstan. The last result I would like to highlight is the change of emphasis in criminal justice. The prosecutors' change program, the police change projects, and judicial reform, all of these are about better protection of the interest of society, better communications with the public, and serving the public. While perhaps difficult to measure, I believe this is a big change and a true manifestation of the values promoted by the country's constitution. In conclusion, I would like to stress that while great things have been achieved, there is still a long way to go to ensure the permanent sustainability and further rollout of the reform. What I can say is that we from the EU side stand ready to help and cooperate through the available platforms and instruments. Finally, I would like to give special thanks to the Kazakh authorities for their cooperation and support, and wish success in continued process of the reform in the country. Also, I want to express the gratitude of the EUCJ team for its dedicated commitment and successful work. Rahmat.
Спасибо большое, господин Метсон.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Metzen. I would like to note that it was your section that has had to carry the heavy burden, the heavy work of the organizational work, including the financing of a project, the funding and the money. Of course, if the success of the project is there, and I'm sure we will witness that, it goes thanks to your structures. Well, now I would like to give a floor to the head of the public agency, which throughout the life of this project has worked very closely. Very closely with the project. He worked with the project, with the General Prosecution and the Supreme Court as well. You probably understand that we are talking about the General Prosecution, the Supreme Court of Kazakhstan, the Jacques Kajman. Thank you very much, Igor Ivanovich. When I received the invitation to attend this conference, I had this movie right in front of my eyes, showing me the whole story of the EUCJ project. The Secretariat, as usual, has given me two options: to send the chairman of the panel of judges or someone from the apparatus, but I disagreed. I said, I'll go myself, because we need to be grateful. I needed to be grateful, and I'm fully confident and without any exaggeration can tell you that this project has given a lot of good and positive results, has caused a lot of useful things for both of our country and law enforcement and judiciary systems in particular. Of course, it's a pity that the project has come to an end. It is a pity. But any project has its life cycle. The project should be over one day. It comes to an end one day, and that time has come. 3 years have flown by. And I would like to give you some history that I'm familiar with personally, because I think it was a unique project, and the main result, the main output is that we have learned to work towards achieving the ultimate goal, having clear objectives, clearly stated indicators, and specific products. So, speaking of history, at the end of 2012, after 10 years of vagabonding around different public agencies, the head of state has returned me or brought me back to the General Prosecution Office. In those 10 years, I have worked in public institutions, in corporate sector, and the government, and the parliament. And I saw that many system-wide problems can be addressed through a project management-based approach. And there are a number of such technologies, but it's just one of the tools, effective tools, that allow one to achieve the goals and objectives. Of course, initially, the General Prosecution didn't perceive this initiative pretty well. Someone was openly disagreeing with me and opposing, saying what the project was about. It's something unacceptable for law enforcement system. We can't even talk about that. Someone was, quietly sabotaging it. But many were smiling when looking at us. Nevertheless, in a steady, persistent, rigorous manner, we started pushing our initiatives. And what were the projects, actually? There were 10 measures to reduce prison population. I'm actually talking about the end of 2012 and beginning of 2013. So there were such projects as 10 measures to reduce prison population, reconciliation, civil process, probation, instead of prisons, probations, and electronic monitoring bracelet, the employment in colonies 2017, and a number of other projects. And what's interesting that when you do this kind of project, this kind of initiatives, there are always many interesting people that sort of gravitate towards such initiatives.
And these projects, first of all, they got us familiar with Savlemi Ktepaeva. We were very surprised, pleasantly surprised, with her enthusiasm, with her desire to do so many good things for the country. At that time, she was the head of Penal Reform International, PRI. She's a quite well-known person in the country, and she's this fragile lady when you look at her. But when you look at her deeds, they're very impressive, and you can really, really respect her. So when we were starting making our first steps on this projects in the general prosecutors at that time, I was a deputy general prosecutor, and the projects were on those issues and matters that were in the scope of my professional duties. And she said that the European Union has this intention to give this one grant, and there are certain experts who want to be able to implement this grant, and there is an opportunity to create to establish a meeting with them. Of course, I was very happy and I agreed for the meeting. We met with experts from the European Union, from the European countries, and we talked about our plans, our different aspirations. We shared that we have different initiatives that really will give certain impact and result, but we need the funds and we need the resources. And usually such funds, they're not given by the budget, Republican budget. So what would we use this budget for? We would involve different experts who already have experience in implementing this type of projects. We need seminars, we need more training, we need to learn what project management is, what management is in general, because no one teaches the things. And many of us, we manage by basing it on our intuition, how we feel it. But the idea what is management as a science, we didn't know that. What project management was, we didn't know that. And that is exactly why after a certain time, we got really, really lucky. This group of experts, they won that tender for the grant, and they get the right to administer this project. And that's how we started our work in 2015, 16, and 17. I will now name certain results that we achieved during these years. And most of all, I will be talking about the General Prosecutor's Office, because the first 2 years of the cooperation with the EUCJ and many efforts and resources of the EUCJ were dedicated and addressed to modernizing and transforming the prosecutor's office. And I think there is a reason behind that, because our system, the general prosecutor system, we're very happy to get this help. We always found free time to meet with the representatives of the project. We did realize that there's certain routine work, everyday work that you have to do, that you were busy with from morning to end of your working day, but also there are some other parts to your work. It's something more strategic, something more important, something more long-term. And if we will not do this strategic work, that routine work will just devour us. That's why we always found some time. We would find our best members of our organization to meet with the representatives of the EUCJ project, and the EUCJ project team always witnessed our readiness, our desire for this change, how we were committed to this implementation of this initiative. That's why this cooperation was very intensive. And also I want to mention that another important lucky result that we got from this project is Nazgul Yergalieva, national expert. She has many good qualities to her personality, and it's important to mention who were the people implementing this work, and then technologies and other methods that were used will be mentioned. So Nazgul, she really impressed us with thorough knowledge of criminal process of leading countries, of the justice systems. That's why research specialists as Nazgul Yergalieva, Saulye Miktepaeva, and of course Mr. Bill Mather, the strategic leader of the EUCJ, we had really intensive work. And each Saturday we would meet either in the project management office or quite often out of the GPO building, because we wanted to get out of the old building, all the old standards and premises and stereotypes. And I want to say that these three really bright, impressive leaders, they helped us to implement many things, to turn many things come true. That is why I want to mention now, name one by one, what exactly was done, because you could be talking for a very long time about how good and talented these people are, but to be more precise and to be able to have a clear picture what we managed to do with their help, I will name them. Well, first of all, we managed to create the team of reformers. The reformers team, it was done not by the order of the general prosecutor. These were the people who themselves voluntarily wanted to be in this team. They said they had the personal intention to that. And on Saturdays, they would come together in the project management office and sometimes out of the prosecutor's office. So this team of prosecutors, of reformers, they were of 12 people. They were trained by the EUCJ team. They really showed us a lot of new things, especially related to management. And this reformers team gave a lot of contribution to modernizing and transforming the prosecutors from both legislation side and from the organization side, how we organize our work. It was already mentioned that we created the project management office, and it's not just another room, another premises that we have at in the building. This is exactly place where all those discussions, brainstorming was happening. That is exactly the place where all these ideas, new initiatives were born, and where those new steps were getting shaped. Those steps and projects and ideas that we would implement in practice. Thirdly, those ideas and decisions, we need to cascade them into the regions across the country. That is when we decided to create the pool of change agents. And who is a change agent? Each oblast, each region would provide 2 or 3 prosecutors, and we would train these people too, and they, with this fire of new initiative, of this desire to change something, they would go across the regions and share this feeling. That's how we were creating at that time new external and internal communication channels. And everything I'm mentioning right now, it was done with great support with EUCJ. We created the portal called Oilan-Tab. That's a online hosting for the video reportings of the prosecutors. We had different accounts on different social media, and Duman Kojakhmetov was the person who was responsible for this. He's another important person that we were lucky to find, whom we invited from the corporate sector. We needed such people with that type of thinking who could change our conservative and routine way of thinking and operating. And the 5th achievement, we were looking for an answer for the question, so what should be the mission of the prosecutor should be? And it turned out that this is the most complicated task to define the mission of the prosecutor, because we were witnessing that the system is not focused. It doesn't have a certain clear zone of responsibility. The only responsibility that we had was to do everything, to do all possible checks. Why? Because according to the Constitution, we were it was our duty, it was our obligation to monitor the legality of the different processes. But still, you could see that there's every sphere is based on different legislation, and it meant that at that moment in time we didn't have any framework or any boundaries to our supervision. So we had to carry all the responsibilities for supervision of different 60 controlling bodies. So the prosecutors were checking everything. They would go into the schools, in the kindergartens, and checking the temperature in the classrooms. And we're not even talking about tenders and how we used to check the private businesses. So it meant that each prosecutor was checking and doing the supervision the way he wanted to. That is exactly why that work was not effective. But anyway, again, we got very lucky at that moment because the constitutional reform began, and the last amendments that were introduced later, they defined the mission, the mission of the prosecutor. First of all, yes, the high supervision was maintained, but still it changed. It wasn't that unlimited type of supervision. In the law on the prosecutor's office, now according to the constitution, we had the right to limit the scope and scale of the supervision function of the prosecutor's office. Now the prosecutor can't just following his initiative go and check certain business. Of course, different situations may occur, but still, to do that, the general prosecutor himself needs to give an order. We renewed the law on prosecutor's office. Now it follows the new constitutional functions of the prosecutor, and taking that into account, we approved the new structure for the prosecutor's office, which should be mentioned before, never changed from the Soviet times. And if you look at the structure of the prosecutor's office, now it follows the structure of the developed Western countries. Another important mission of the prosecutor, the second one, is to do the criminal prosecution. And at that time, with the help of EUCJ project, with participation of different experts from the project, with their help, we created the model what the criminal prosecution system should look like. And within that model, we delineated the spheres, the functions of the investigation and the functions of the prosecution. And that is exactly how many European countries work. For instance, Germany, because basically our criminal process follows the German model. This matter is very relevant right now and is still being discussed. The sixth achievement, it was mentioned before already today, we created the Justice Services Centers. This is more than just individual consultations with public. This is providing services to the public to help each and every citizen. Even if someone comes with an issue that should be readdressed to other state agency, our prosecutors would help these people to write down their requests to those organizations. That's why we demolished all the walls. We created this green corridor, and people right from the street, without any ID, without any check, they could come into the prosecutor's office buildings. We demolished all those different fences that we used to have, and you don't need to appoint a meeting in advance. And the centers, they have the mediator support, lawyers, psychologists, notary services, and others. We taught and trained these people how they should communicate with the common public, what language they should use, how they should express their respect to common public. The electronic queuing line was created as this practice is used in banks. We created better waiting areas and etc. So we managed to create such justice service centers in all the regional centers across the country, and also in quite a good number of regions and districts. And this led to increase in the number of different requests to the administration of president, parliament, and others. Talking more about what we managed to do jointly with EUCJ, it's reforming the HR processes. It's renewing how we select the staff with application of best modern HR technologies. So when we were observing the situation that this competition for a certain position, vacancy, is going in a poor way, we stopped everything, all the selection and recruitment, and we did the whole overview of the situation. And at that time, 2,300 candidates to become prosecutors sent the request for the vacancies. However, only 126 managed to go through all the new checks. And with the help of the EUCJ support, we involved Pricewaterhouse, Nazarbayev University, Deloitte Company, and we renewed and redid our systems of selection. So as a result of that, 126 candidates, or that big number, became prosecutors. At that moment, the people really believed that you can get into the prosecutor's office without having any friend or relative working in the organization. And before, all the opinion polls would show us that there is a common belief that if you want to work at the prosecutor's office, you need to know someone from there. And those 126 new prosecutors, having selected those people, we did another second check for this 126, because we needed to identify those young people who will join the project management office. So out of those 126 people, 5 were chosen into the PMO, with the support and recommendation of the EUCJ project, especially in particular with the support and recommendations of Bill Mather. Those 5 colleagues they joined the project management office of the General Prosecutor's Office. And also we did another competition between the current prosecutors. So we created the best PMO we could have, with the most talented, motivated, committed people who joined the project management office. And those were 10 people. Those were our members who were coordinating the implementation of all our initiatives. Another example that I want to give, the EUCJ project, having studying and reviewing our problems in the HR system, they invited an expert specialist, Magella Myers from England. There was a time when she was doing the same job at Dubai in Scotland Yard by modernizing the police. And the value of her consultation was in teaching us and sharing with us how to get rid of unnecessary poor performance, basically. So we had to do it in 3 stages. We did our first stage of that filtering. It was quite successful. When we were getting ready for the second round of that filtering, certain changes happened, and I think at that time people got a relief, because unfortunately that job didn't have a continuation. Anyway, that project taught us how to understand, how to set your goals, how to focus on systemic and important issues, how to be effective in achieving your goals. I want to name at least only one project. There are many, many different projects, but the project I want to mention now, it's called 10 Measures on Reducing the Prison Population. And thanks to this project, Kazakhstan announced of itself as a country not around the CIS region, but also beyond the CIS region. And in 2017, last year, the government of the Russian Federation, they had an international contest on project management, and we also sent our bids, our vacancy, our project. From Moscow, the delegation of 10 assessors came to our project management office. They had a look at all our project documents. They studied our results. They asked us questions. That was a very thorough check. Then our team went to Moscow to defend this project, and as a result, we won the Grand Prix, the main prize. So we can say that we became the rival and the equal to such titans of project management of Russian Federation as Sberbank, administration of Sbergorod Oblast, and others. In general, we brought 5 projects to that contest. All of them got certain prizes in the nominations categories as smart management. That project was protection of business. Second was Zangdalılık informational system. That's the system that helps you to identify the mistakes in the judicial decisions, judicial acts. It's like an AI-based system. The third project was Kazakhstan without domestic violence. And the next project is best HR in prosecutor's office. In Moscow, they also suggested us to participate in the extended international competition in 2018. And this year, recently, in summer, the project on reducing prison population, it got into the final stage of the world competition on project management. And recently we had experts, 4 experts coming from the Netherlands. They again studied thoroughly all our steps and all the documentation, all our results, and we are expecting the results of this commission and what they will say about our project.
And the final results will be delivered on the 30th of October in Helsinki. And we're really hopeful that we will get some winner prizes. So, summarizing, I would like to say that the biggest impact wasn't that. The biggest impact was that we've succeeded to change this bigger picture. We've been able to shift this paradigm, the mindset, the way the prosecutors used to think. Although not completely, we have more supporters, like proponents rather than opponents since the beginning of the project. We've been able to demonstrate that there is different vision, different perception of the prosecution, that there are other technologies which work towards achieving a result and that can be effectively used. Clearly, there is still a lot to do. There's a lot of unfinished business. We, the public agencies, must admit that not everyone has woken up. It wasn't for everyone a wake-up call when the EUCJ project has just been launched. Not everyone perceived it well, not everyone believed the value of this project, but the situation is totally different now. We all have a different enthusiasm, and we are ready to work in this format. We've learned how to work in this format. We've learned how to work in close collaboration with each other. That's why we are very interested and are ready. Here I am addressing the leaders and representatives of the European Union and other international organizations who can take decisions as to providing support and implementing projects here in Kazakhstan. For project implementation, we have everything. We have passion. I mean, we have this string that keeps on charging us and pushes us towards action. We have a faith, and we have strong belief in our capabilities. We have energy. I mean, we have this vitality. And if we take these huge forces, huge strengths, and we engage all of them, we have very clear strategy, very clear plans with specific indicators and very clear, understandable products. Therefore, hence, there are a lot of unfinished things that need to be finalized in our justice system. We are very interested, especially in attracting experts. Experts who could help us improve our civil proceedings. Because for the judiciary, civil proceedings is something that overburdens the judiciary. 65% of what we have to deal with has nothing to do with the dispute. But we shouldn't transform our judiciary into a conveyor, because that would mean there's no quality ensured in resolution of very difficult commercial and especially investment disputes. In conclusion, I would like to thank the European Union and all of the leaders, all of those who have participated and contributed and who decided to allocate, to implement this very unique project, having allocated this amazing grant to develop, to perfect criminal justice in Kazakhstan. I would like to specifically thank Mr. Bill Mazer, Saule Mektipaeva, Nazgul Irgalieva, and their loyal assistants and supporters such as Nazım, Aygirim, and many other colleagues whom I personally know, whom I've met many times throughout the last 3 years. And I'd like to wish you all the best in your noble mission. And I hope that there will be many more projects like this one, productive, interesting, impactful in your portfolio. Thank you very much. Jakub Kadamanovich, thank you very much for your high appreciation, for your warm words. I truly did not know that there is such a high number of beautiful photos, so I can have a portfolio now. So thank you. It was really nice, and it was a great honor to work with you towards achieving these results jointly. Now I would like to join the words of gratitude to Jakub Kadamanovich for providing a very detailed coverage of all the initiatives, of all the aspects of this project. However, if you allow me, I would like to comment. So, a little bit, I would want the audience to not to have an impression that there was a stagnation 3 years ago, but we somehow took it to a different level. No, I think we need to give a historical context to how our judiciary was developing. And what did we have back in 1991? It was Soviet-style courts which simply changed their names, changed the title. So what was the development of our law enforcement, the judiciary like? Of course, we could demolish everything. We could destruct everything and choose the common law system, continental English law system, and move in a new quality, kind of, along the new line. However, the country has chosen a gradual reform path. In 1991, we gave up the lay assessors institution. We have introduced professional judges. Everything seems to be working fine, but in 1997, the very first constitutional reform, when the president took a decision to introduce the jury trial. So the shortage or this underrepresentation of the civil society in the justice system was felt back then already. There were some lengthy and heated discussions as to the model of jury trial. There was the initial idea of Anglo-American, Anglo-Saxon, or maybe choose the European continental, the common law system, the way they had back in the 50s. And then we decided we stick with the continental European path. We borrowed a lot from the modern French jury trial systems. Gradually, we've been narrowing down the competences of the court instances. The number of court instances have been reduced. The president's been paying a lot of attention to hiring practices of justice, assuming that judges are the legal elite. So, and think of how much work has been invested. According to Constitution 1995, the former Constitutional Council was established, initially governed by the President himself. Then the Institute of the Chairman has been introduced, of the High Supreme Council, and lately it has turned into an independent institute that deals with that exclusively. So I would like to express particular gratitude to our foreign experts and to project leadership for when we were discussing the hiring and location placement of the judges in line with European standards discussed. They have extensively contributed. We have the chairman of the Supreme High Court Council, Kosanakov, who himself attended the study tour when our team of judges went to England, to France, to Italy, where and they studied the issue of selecting and placing of the judges and of the judiciary members. Later, closer to our modern times, the president instructs to modernize all of the law and legal system in Kazakhstan, judiciary and law enforcement being the primary focus. And I think many has been done. The significant part of the reform was done in that area, and that's where the EUCJ has contributed extensively. Jakub Kazumanovich has very fairly, I must say, told us about the work and performance of this project in two structures, the prosecution and the Supreme Court, the judiciary. It is probably easy for him to do that because he worked in both agencies, both structures, but I would like to warn you against having an impression that there was a Soviet-style prosecution with the general oversight and we broke everything and now moving towards the purely European structures. But no, let's go back to the 90s, 90, 91, when there was a question as to how to delineate the powers and authorities of local executive authorities, local administration, the central powers, and Tolga Tsadebekovich remembers pretty well Viktor Alexandrovich Malinovsky, who worked back then at the presidential administration. How to preserve a uniform Kazakhstani rule of law. Could we really give up all of everything that we have inherited from the Soviet times and just shift rapidly to another system? Yes, probably we could, but how effective was that going to be? I remember a dialogue that I had with an expert from the US. So I asked him, how can you ensure, you know, of course, being the federal state, they have a different, of course, approach. But anyhow, how do you make sure that there is uniform rule of law or uniform lawfulness that goes through the hierarchy? Can a governor not obey the law, the federal law, or not obey of the president? And he said, why shouldn't he? But I said, why can't he fail? Can he really fail and not do that? Well, if he has common sense, if he's normal, he's going to do that. But I said, can there be other structures who would not obey the instructions? So, no, that is not possible in principle. So let's remember the 90s. And let's remember the condition and the status of the public administration apparatus. That was exactly when the decision was taken to ensure overall oversight and general oversight by the prosecution. But back then, the president has already had a task in mind to gradually shift from that system to the modern European system. That is why it is a great pleasure for me to give a floor to Marat Maratovich Ahmedjanov, who will speak about the current state of play of the prosecution and prosecutorial supervision in particular. So, Deputy General Prosecution, Igor Ivanovich, can I have a small remark? First of all, I did not have a task to talk about everything that has been done in Kazakhstan since independence. On October 11th, at the Supreme Court, by the way, here, together with the OECD, we will be hosting a very interesting conference that will be devoted to problems of commercial or investment dispute resolution. Within the framework of that conference, we would be talking about all the achievements of our judiciary that have been secured throughout the whole period since our independence. So a lot will be said, and definitely life doesn't stop, life moves on, and we will talk about our plans, our thoughts and ideas of the head of state to achieve the strategic objective to be in the top 30 most developed countries. Well, as for your knowledge, of course, I give a bow to you because you are my teacher. No, I'm not here to teach. I'm just here to sort of moderate. But anyhow, I made this historical overview wasn't to somehow criticize the previous speaker. It was for our international guests, especially, to understand the condition and the state of our legal system and to see how much has already been done in the last 25 years, being the quarter of a century. So, distinguished participants of the conference, on behalf of the General Prosecutor, Kairat Kojamzharov, who is unfortunately on a mission now. Would like to thank you personally, the EUCJ people and EUCJ team, for very close collaboration as well as the high level of today's event. Today we are wrapping up the results of very important, interesting, and most importantly, productive work. Jacques Kosmanovich has already spoke about the milestones of the project and of all the stages of our legal system development, but I would like to speak about the implementation aspect. No one has any doubt, it's doubtless that the EU project has helped to radically improve the situation and has significantly contributed to further development of law enforcement and judicial systems of Kazakhstan. The prosecution were the first one to feel, to sense this serious contribution, because it was with the prosecution that the project, the EUCJ, started its activity, its operation. Since then, we were walking along one path, hand by hand. We turned into one team with one common shared goals and objectives. What is 3 years? 3 years is like a short period of time, but as the head of state says, there can be days that weigh as a year, but there can be years that weigh as centuries. So it is in that dimension that we assess and evaluate our work. Since the independence, Kazakhstan has been introducing a very gradual judiciary and law enforcement system reforms. The time demands new changes, new results. The world around us is changing. The economy of the country is changing. And we do understand that there were some remnants of the Soviet past, such elements of its punitive policy, and as a result of that, the head of state has given an instruction to modernize the grounds and foundation for the reform of the criminal justice, so that we could exercise, we look at the process, criminal process, as a regular layman. It is in connection with the instruction of the head of state. This project has been launched as well, which was very, very helpful and very instrumental. So what was that? They brought us the global and world practices. They brought us the world-level experts, international experts. We had the opportunity to see how OECD countries do that. There have been a very serious study. There have been lots of material and resource support, and actually the project has provided very deep methodological help. It is noteworthy that the European Union, being Kazakhstan, delivers its important mission to improve the quality and efficiency of our criminal procedure. I would like to note that with the support of the project, the majority of the prosecution reform have become possible. So the project enabled some of the reforms, and it is in unity that our strength grows. Kazakhs have a proverb saying that the burden carried together feels lighter. So together we've been able to address a lot of systemic and serious issues. Let me highlight the most important issues. We started a lot of projects that were covering or kind of touching upon the interests of the whole society, of the whole general public. So we tried to use a kind of layman's approach, trying to feel what the process feels like when you are not a system, when you're not a judiciary, but as some person from the outside. So what it gave us, when you remember, you will recall that when Kazakhstan got independence, Kazakhstan was in the top 3 countries on the number of prison population. So at the moment of independence, we had more than 100,000 people in our prisons. And something needed to be done by that. Almost every 7th family of Kazakhstan had a convict or had someone in prison. And as a previous speaker have noted, it has been to reduce prison population has been significantly supported and facilitated by the Project 10 measures to reduce prison population. Thanks to the work of this project, the prison population has reduced to 32,000 people, and in the international prison population index, Kazakhstan has improved its position from the 35th place to 82nd place. We have shut down 8 colonies, 8 prisons, and we have saved 12 billion tenge that have been redirected to socially important needs and projects. So the project was completed in 2017. We are on the 66th position, but we have gained the momentum. The project is still sort of ongoing, and we are now on the 82nd place and position in this index. And in line with the law on humanization, reduction of decreasing the inquisitory approach, more than 4,000 people have been released from prisons. There were some skeptics who were negative about dehumanization. They did not believe in our initiative. They did not understand the nature of humanizing the criminal process. But I would like to emphasize once again its main concept. The concept was that isolation should be imposed on those who are truly and really a danger to the society. As for the others, we have had 4 types of probation. The others should have been re-socialized, resettled, and brought back to the society as full-fledged members of the society, of the community. The head of state has given us a very clear message that reforms should not undermine the rights and safety of our citizens. So those who should be in prisons, those have to be people who have committed grave crimes, burglaries, pedophiles, rapists, thieves. They all should be in the society. But the other one should be transformed and should be added back to our general community and society. Therefore, these measures have not had any adverse effect on the crime rates of our country, and the statistics is the proof of that. In comparison with 2012, the number of serious crimes and grave crimes has declined by 22%, such as burglary, rape, and recidivism has declined by 20% as well. Reduction of the inquisitory approach and attitude is there as well. It is, of course, a long process. We needed to create in the society a zero tolerance to crime. Many people have very freely expressed their dissent when there was punitive approaches, and as a result of that, the law on modernization of criminal process have been passed.
And its special nature was about improving the adversarial nature of the process, in expanding the powers of the lawyers, reducing the duration of the detention from 72 to 48 hours, and even to juveniles from 48 to 24 hours. Here there were many different peculiarities, that within 24 hours the investigator can't gather all the necessary evidence, etc. But now today practice showed that 84% of the sanctions or measures applied are applied not within, it can be applied within 48 hours. And the project on protection of business is about humanizing the whole economical type of offenses. We minimize the risks for lawless, actually different checks. We stopped criminal investigations when there is no audit or no proof of different criminal harm reduced. We decriminalized different economical type of offenses. All these measures really gave a good impact on the business in Kazakhstan. We improved our ranking in the doing business. From 2015, we improved our position by 41 points. Also, we should mention digitalization. The rapidly changing world, the economical progress may teach us about different new technologies. And of course, prosecutor's office here is not an exclusion. In this regard, one of the unique projects was done jointly with the Legal Statistics Committee on many directions. And we were the pioneers in many ways in this matter. The state program Digital Kazakhstan has 5 projects from the GPO. It's electronic criminal case. It reduces the falsification of data, provides transparency, and expedites the criminal process. From the beginning of the year in this mode, over 9,000 cases were investigated. the informational system called Zangalek was created. It automated the whole process from the moment of registration of an offense till the enforcement of the judicial act. And the system itself identifies certain mistakes if there were made any and shapes the analytics. Another is unified register of administrative offenses, electronic way of sending requests, and also system for protecting the business is called YERSOP. All of them, each of them is a global project, and of course everyone understands it's clear how digitalization is important and significant. I want to thank once again the EUCJ project, because having going to study visits to OECD countries, using your support, the EUCJ provided the procurement, the multimedia classrooms, the many printing houses for the Law Enforcement Academy, all these good things. They helped us to improve the quality of training in the Law Enforcement Academy, both the academy and the regional hub on counteracting global threats under the legal academy. And as the previous speaker already mentioned, we launched the Legal Justice Services centers both in the center and across the country, and this is evidence how we can move closer to the public and be more public-oriented. This year, this center was visited by 10,000 people. It was noted that part of them, about 50% of the projects were done within the project management office. Certain of our projects were recognized as best international community, international project management community. Using this opportunity, I'd like to thank the stakeholders, the Minister of Interior and the Chairman of the Supreme Court for their joint cooperation. This EUCJ project helped to join everyone, not only in this one room, but also join us around our common goals. And we should be linked and working together in achieving these goals. This is a situation when helping others, you're helping yourself, and it means helping all those for the benefit of whom we're working. This is a common case. There shouldn't be such thing as ministerial or one agency interests. We realize that this is the barrier in our cooperation. And dear friends, this is not just mottos or slogans. This is the true results of our joint work. This is a completion, final stage of the project, but our relationships and interaction, they go much beyond this time frame, and we hope for further cooperation and effective interaction. We'll be very happy to see more of such projects. Thank you for your attention. Thank you a lot, Mr. Ahmedjanov, for such a detailed description of the work done jointly with the EUCJ project. Next speech, the floor is given to the Minister of Interior, because we have been working with the Ministry of Interior from the very beginning of the project. We worked with the Penal Committee on improving the probation institute in the country, and about 1 year ago we started intensively working with the Ministry of Interior itself. And using this opportunity, I would like to thank one very important person thanks to whom this job happened. This initiative got implemented. I want to thank Turmagambetova Jimusudigenovna, a great human rights activist in the country, because her active contribution, we managed to push forward this initiative. Thank you so much. And with Mr. Kasymov, we met quite often from the beginning of the project, and last October, previous year, we met once again, and we tried to think together how our EUCJ project can be helpful in the agenda, in the ways that police modernization could be done. And thanks to the support of Kasymov, Mr. Minister, this work was very intensive. I'm very grateful to the Minister that today he had the opportunity to come to this conference. He cancelled his business trip, because for him it's very important to share how the project was jointly working with the Ministry of Interior on modernizing police, and maybe what future changes in modernization we can see in that area. So the floor is yours. Thank you, Saule. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone and express my gratitude to the European Union delegation to Kazakhstan and to international experts community for conducting this expert support with the Ministry of Interior and for providing the surveys and studies that were kindly suggested to us. I want to draw this into sections. So the type of support we received from the EUCJ and what recommendations we received from that. First of all, I'd like to mention that yes, indeed, as was mentioned before, we started reforming the law enforcement not 1 year ago. Very recently, this work was a continuous work done before. Before the police was limited by the old-fashioned statistics and analytics. We were assessing and evaluating police only by different rates and numbers, or the clearance numbers, and quite often our agencies, quite often they would conceal certain numbers and working for the benefit of better numbers, better statistics. Of course, starting from 2012, jointly with the GPO, we started 100% full registration of all the offences. We introduced electronic registration. This allowed us on the front line with the interaction with the public to improve the work. The problem was that so deep and difficult that we had to start the criminal liability for concealing certain offences. Those studies that were provided by the EUCJ, we can see from them that indeed there are some issues with public discontent. If you look at the statistics, 70% of crimes are thefts, are stealing, and of course all the law enforcement should be working in this direction to solve this. In order to do this, the whole program of measures was launched, and jointly with municipalities, local executive bodies, we will implement it. Also want to mention, jointly with the experts, we created our own project management office. This project management office includes our best of the best staff members from different departments across the ministry, from our training institutions, and I want to say that they've done a tremendous work. This project management office work was done by the police police officers from some European countries. I express my gratitude to the probation institute representative of the UK. The expert from the really assisted us in this. This project management office of the MOI started 24 different projects. Out of them, 3 of them, they already had gone through pilot mode, and now they're being integrated in the work on the Ministry of Interior. Another 3 projects now we are working through in the pilot mode, in the pilot region. And using the presence of the members of parliament, I want to mention, indeed, we created the probation service. We adopted a law on probation. We introduced all 4 stages of probation. And we thought, like, this is it. We've done everything with law and probation. We adopted what else we could do. But when the practitioners from the UK, probation practitioners, they came and looked at our practice in 3 oblasts, they had a look at how the work is done in practice, and we realized that even though we adopted the law, this is not everything is happening full-fledged in regions. That's why certain innovations, certain advices were given to us in order to help the people who got engaged into the criminal process on the very initial stage. So we improved the pre-trial probation stage. So at the first moment when the person gets into the attention of the law enforcement agencies. Even at that stage, already probation officers should start working and interacting and supporting this person, and preparing the pre-trial reports that would be provided to the court. And through this pre-trial reports, the court would be able to make a decision what type of sanction to use. And we will jointly, with general prosecutors as well, will make recommendation to make certain amendments to the law. This is exactly what was improved jointly with the EUCJ in probation. There is another project about creating front offices for public. It was a great project. We started now practically implementing it across the country in all the different regions and districts. Also should be mentioned, the service should be mentioned that was provided by the experts. Of course, here we can say this was a very quality work, very professional work, and this work gave us, the study gave us good information for Kazakhstani law enforcement agencies. Now we know where Kazakhstan stands. We know how public perceives us. I'm talking about the study, victimization study. And again, I want to thank for this important international victimization studies done in Kazakhstan. I again want to thank everyone for this cooperation and constructive dialogue. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kasimov. And to be frank, I have a special attitude and relation to the law enforcement, because when I was young, long time ago, I think I was very lucky. I worked as an investigator for 3 years. It seems like 3 years is not much, but those 3 years were enough for me to understand and to realize the burden and the difficult nature and the dignity of working in this profession. And indeed, the thing that were mentioned by Mr. Kasimov, indeed, the probation law, for instance, that was adopted with the assistance of the EUCJ. Here, I guess we need also to thank the members of parliament who passed this law and who adopted this law. From psychological point of view, it was not easy for us. On one hand, there should be a certain responsibility, a certain punishment, but at the same time, you think you want to tolerate something, and you're going mild on the person who offended and who violated the law. So being able to convince that these two principles are not contradicting each other, and that the method, or actually principle of being economical in your repression is not actually meaning that you will not be, that the person will not be held responsible for his deed. And the president quite often mentioned about zero tolerance to offenses. I guess there will be a further discussion about this, and I will give more comments about that later. Now, with great pleasure, I would like to give the floor to the head of the project, who worked both with the GPO, with the Supreme Court, with the Ministry of Interior. He's a strategic leader of the EUCJ project, to Bill Mather.
What strikes me is that I know so many people in this audience, and it is the people on the platform and in the audience who have made the achievements, who have had the vision, who have had the determination to take the country forward. It is down to leadership, commitment, and motivation. As a project, we happened to arrive at the right time. We were able to support the aspirations, to help overcome the frustrations. And this is what I want to briefly mention in my contribution. Change is a continual process. It's happening everywhere. It's the pressure of the modernization, the technologies, globalization, the problems of terrorism, the issues of international trade, everywhere is dealing with change. But change is much more concentrated, intense, and continual when it comes to a new and emerging country like Kazakhstan. We've heard a bit about the journey from 1991, and I want to give a little bit of structure to that and my suggestion about the phases of change and why this is a most important time in the crucial formation of a mature, effective, dynamic country. The problem with change, when you've got a lot of it, is virtually all change has degrees of unfinished business. Nothing is neat about change, and change is also uncertainty. It is not something you can pin down and be completely confident about. So it requires very strong top-level leadership, which we have got here on this platform in this country, in order that people feel able to take on risk. The other thing about change, ongoing change, is that it gets increasingly resented and resisted, because there is such a thing as change fatigue. And there's cynicism, because quite a lot of announced transformation doesn't transform things in the way that was announced and intended. And when we started, we found all of these matters actually very alive in Kazakhstan. We were told not to use the word transformation because it was discredited, so we talked about change. We found that change was invariably completely top-down and concentrated around the letter of the law and did not necessarily convert into new practices. We found that actually change was often disregarding the culture that needs to shift when there are new ways required of working and being accountable. And everyone we talked to was talking about the Soviet heritage still being dominant in the law enforcement arena. We also found that change was responsive to particular interests or concerns rather than strategic. So our task was to come in and support a raising of the game for change to be effective, sustainable, in the terms that the leadership wanted. So we have never come into our discussions with stakeholders saying this is how things ought to be. That is not the way that we have operated. So I suggest there are 4 evolutionary eras that new emerging nations go through. The first is establishment and formation. The basic constitution, the borders, the concept of citizenship. It is carving up what is this country about. The second is progression and stability, putting in place the effective rule of law, advanced economic institutions, and applying principles of rights and responsibilities. Then you have something fairly solid to work with. The third is actually where I believe things are at now. It is modernization and realization. It's taking the country into what people really want it to be, and not copycatting international operations or policies or laws elsewhere, but adapting for the particular goals and culture of the organization. It's about, therefore, this stage, cultural identity, economic productivity, and social well-being. Beyond this level, the fourth evolutionary area, I suggest, is devolution and accountability. Decentralizing controls, embedding checks and balances on authority, creating systems of empowerment for the population. But modernization and realization has to take place first. So that's where we found ourselves linking in to the national agenda set by the head of state with particularly the 100 steps. Each era has its own periods, its own phases within the era. And there's an initiation, then there's fast-track developments, and then there's an ongoing process of improvement cycles and reviews to give deeper and more comprehensive change. We have tried to help in each of those three periods that are current under the modernization and realization phase. Initiation is about consultation and evidence, communicating aspirations, setting goals, being clear about key performance indicators, determining options. And to do that, we have been able to bring in a lot of different international perspectives in order to broaden the thinking and understanding about what could and should work. In many ways, with that work and the study visits, is quite normal for projects. It's not all that different. The second area, fast-track developments, is where new foundations have got to be put into place, comprehensive stakeholder engagement, joining up across, in this case, the criminal justice system, pathfinding pilots, quick wins, strategically significant change initiatives to create momentum. We have focused our contribution on facilitating and skilling change leadership for this. The form of governance that it needs and the way that engagement can take a whole organization forward rather than leaders and the frontline employees feeling they're in different worlds. We have introduced robust methodologies, tools, and disciplines, which have been adapted according to the particular agency and the particular stage of activity. And the final area of improvement cycles, we've introduced concepts and best practices for ongoing performance reviews, gap analysis, designing solutions. So this sounds pretty technical, but it's a philosophy. It's an approach to developing a different mindset as well as a skill base. I'll go back to what we've actually found. And we found that each of the departments we've worked with the leaders who've been selected to take forward agendas and programs of change, came up with exactly the same thing. 3 things. 1, public trust is the #1 key performance indicator. We have got to build public trust. Number 2, we've got to shift our culture to being a public service. We are not wanting to stay in a situation of being seen as doing to the public, but we are working with the public. And thirdly, we want to be comparable right up the ranks of international standards as professionals. Enormous amount of pride and a real belief in the future exists. I'm used to dealing with change in Western Europe more than anywhere else, and I have to say, it is so refreshing being here, because in Western Europe, the cynicism is very high, the reluctance is very high, the leadership is not good. Here, it's inspirational for me. This is about mindset change. What is achievable, how to go about it. I don't think anyone else could quite do this as well as the EU. And the reason why is because this is multinational teams of contributions. It is not nationally specific. There are other bodies, like the UN and OSCE, that have exactly the same kind of enrichment that can come in and serve the agendas that the leadership are actually developing. The unique contribution that I believe has come from this EU project was that actually it's quite large. It was quite a lot of money in a short period of time. We have been very multinational, and we have brought up and developed in partnership with our stakeholders the right kind of tools and methods to address the progress of the criminal justice system and in the context of the development of the nation. We have a legacy. You have to talk these terms to funders. You're closing the doors, but you have to talk about the legacy. And I think there is a real legacy. The legacy is a strong, really strong, well-equipped leadership that actually permeates right through the organizations. It's not just at the pinnacle. It is out in the regions. It is into the offices. There's a dynamic understanding, enthusiasm and momentum for change, because there's confidence of what can now be achieved. Because initially it was the GPO that had the courage to do what has not been done before. And then that has proven the concept of change. I think also we have a legacy about how international can support Kazakhstan's own agenda, own approach, own culture, not coming in and being in any way saying what ought to be happening. And there clearly is an appetite for a lot more of this support and activity. I'd like to close by saying that the team that I have been privileged to work with is outstanding. just amazing. In your packs, you'll find their contact details. They're looking for work. And they sure deserve it. And we'll be very happy to supply CVs and background information. We don't want to disband as a team, but as was said earlier, there is a time for every purpose, and we have come to the end of this. It's also been a privilege and pleasure to work for all of us with yourselves. There is one face in the audience I recognize who did say to me at one stage, "I see more of you than I do my wife." The intensity of the work that people have taken on has been incredible, and we have responded to that with great pleasure, and thank you all.
Thank you very much, Bill, for your speech, for your presentation, especially for a very delicate British humor that it finally made laugh. Any other jokes somehow didn't reach it to the hearts of people. Probably the British humor has its way of getting to the hearts and minds of people. Well, now we are approaching the very important part of our discussion of our conference, a time when we can have questions, when we can have disputes. We have all the opportunities for the question and answer session, maybe disagree with some of the speakers. About half an hour. We have this half an hour Q&A and discussion opportunity, and I see some raised hands and those willing to ask a question. Ms. Zhemys Turmagambetova, the microphones will be brought to you. Please raise your hands when you have a question, please. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very happy for having participated in this project, although at a later stage of last year only. And as a project participants that worked in charge of the Ministry of Interior contacts, then the beginning of the transportation of the Ministry of Interior has been launched. That was firstly the establishment of the Project Management Office, 24 projects that have been initiated, and I'm sure that implementation of this project will help to transform the work of police. There are lots of questions, lots of issues there. One of the number one, my question to the minister: are you going to give up your non-profile functions of the Ministry of Interior? The police work should focus exclusively on protecting law and order and protecting the citizens' rights and freedoms, whereas current Ministry of Interior seems to wear the hats of the Emergency Response Committee, the Security Agency, Ministry of Migration. So there are lots of functions that do not belong truly to the Ministry of Interior, to the police. If you delegate them to the competitive environment, or if you delegate them to another agency, then the number of policemen will reduce, will drop. We are not a police state, but in fact, we have very high number of policemen per every 100,000 people. Though that's my first question. And the second question, I would like to draw the attention of the audience and Igor Ivanovich Rogov. You remember that we discussed the high number of prison population in 1999, and happily 2 decades after, we can observe a significant reduction of prison population in Kazakhstan. And the third, I'm very thankful to the European Union and Council of Europe for this project, because the project should not end. We can move it and kind of shift it to the regional context. The experience, the practices that have been accumulated in Kazakhstan in terms of modernization of law enforcement system and the future of criminal justice, I think this experience can be freely shared with the neighbors. And I know that Uzbekistan has been showing very high interest in this project, and when they hear about the results achieved throughout the project, they are very interested and they actually want to learn from us. And I want to address the delegation of the European Union and the Council of Europe. I think you should, guys, not just continue this project in a new project, but try to preserve and maintain this amazing project office presided and headed by Saule Mektipaeva. I have seen many projects, well-managed, well-administered, well-run projects, but actually I have not seen ever that such a large-scale project was managed in such a smooth, seamless, impeccable way. And in conclusion, I would like to hand over these books, The Level of Trust to Police. I want to give them to you, and one copy is for you only. I would like to tell you that the next survey should give us a totally different result than what we're seeing in this one. Thank you. Thank you, Jim Sutigena. So, there was a question, so... Jim Sutigena, let's agree that Ministry of Interior has already given up its non-profile functions in the last 10 years. We gave up the technical supervision of cars and safety security. As you know, also the medical rehabilitation structure is no longer under the Ministry of Interior. The police exists as police, and there are police departments. What's happening at the Ministry of Interior and the fact that we incorporate the penitentiary and also for the purposes of modernization, we have incorporated the emergency response services. It does not mean that police deals with penal services or emergency response services. So we all know what we're responsible for. We have them as separate committees, and they all know what they're doing. Here we're discussing the Ministry of Interior as the Ministry of Interior at the country level. When we've been thinking of establishing a PMO, there have been few recommendations made, and we agree with them, such as transfer of guarding and security services, and police really shouldn't be involved. We have a lot of private security companies, and we probably would happily give up and get rid of our security police battalions so that functions could be handled by private companies. And as for the number of police, we have 83,000 policemen only. Of them, 15,000 are responsible for security, not for law enforcement, not for investigation, but for security and guarding exclusively. So if we get rid of them, we will have only 70,000 policemen. And again, if we redistribute them, according to the UNODC calculation estimate, then the number of police in Kazakhstan will be 240 per 100,000 people. That will be the level of an average European country. So I do not think we are really a very strong police state, just because we are doing this function, delivering the function. And one more thing to add, that maybe there are some wrong calculations. As for the methodology of estimating the number of policemen, the methodology should include the police structures that are also in charge of investigation, apprehension and arrest, law and order protection, and those policemen are not engaged in the other functions. So I think maybe the methodological calculations were not correct, were not adequate, but we're aware of this problem. So I do not want to say that police works together. Kind of the responsibilities of the Emergency Response Appeal Committee, they overlap with police. We keep them separate.
Thank you. Yesterday, when we were doing the press conference on the project, many journalists asked us, will the Minister of Interior come to your final conference? I do understand there are many questions that could be addressed to the Minister of Interior, but let's also ask more questions about the general development of criminal justice in Kazakhstan. I see one hand there. Alexei Trosha, professor from Nazarbayev University. I think he also has another question. Thank you. I have a question like this, also about the future. The EU project helped to launch the changes in the interaction between the state agencies and the public. The survey and the other study that were done within the framework of the EUCJ, it proved that the public wants fairness, the public wants justice in this interaction, in this communication with the public bodies. So my question is, what exact mechanism or institutions are you planning to base on in order to make sure that this relationship between the public and the government would be based on fairness? I get this question is addressed to everyone, right? So the project called Justice, there was a such project. It was an interagency project. I think Mr. Asanov can start and others will contribute. I guess many would know that the head of the state ordered to start 3 big working groups. And these 3 working groups are dealing with tasks, certain objectives, and one of them is dealing with the further modernization of judiciary, excuse me. And this draft document is being discussed. The decision hasn't been made yet, but now in the working way, we already made certain recommendations what judiciary should look like in Kazakhstan. What judges should have. Of course, they should be independent, highly professional, fair, transparent courts. And under each of these mentioned principles, there is a set of certain recommendations how these principles can be achieved. And the question about what institutes we use as our basis, to that question I'd say our doors are open, and when all the main principles and provisions will be adopted within these working groups, we will discuss on the wider platforms these questions. For instance, I already mentioned in 1 week we will be discussing the problems of handling the investment and commercial disputes in courts. Actually, there's quite a lot of big number of disputes, lawsuits are being dealt in this area by the courts, and we invited to this discussion best experts and judges from the UK, France, the USA and other European countries, and then that working group will be discussing also questions of justice and how to ensure fair process. And as well, there's certain pinpoint projects. For instance, something can be legal but is not fair. The decision can be based on the legal provisions, but it's not fair. Courts make decisions and they're absolutely perfect from the point of legislation, but from the sense of common sense, from point of view of common sense and the angle of fairness, of course, sometimes issues occur. And very common situation when the person buys certain like apartment and is going through, or a car. So the person buys certain property and goes through all the necessary checks, but then somehow he identifies and learns that this property is not his, and somehow, and because originally from whom he was buying that property was not selling that property according to all the necessary legislation, provisions and requirements, and the new buyer learned that he bought the illegal property. So the question of fairness in the situation, what should we do? And this matter is one of the most conceptually important approaches that we will be using when implementing the program on further modernization of judiciary. I support Mr. Asanov's opinion. Yes, I follow his idea. The main principle here is that there should always be legality and lawfulness. So anytime a certain decision is made by the court, but it causes discontent by the public, and we should understand that each court decision, it has an public image effect. And all those projects that I mentioned today, the electronic claim or complaint, this is an indicator of the public state. Today, in digitalization matters, we can see through different digital products, we can see what public is worried about, what judicial decision and act they're not happy with, where should we act now to solve this problem. Because, of course, a certain situation when justice is not being served, especially certain cases when the cases end because of reconciliation. And here we should provide a timely intervention. And the members of parliament looking at the shaped different sets of problems that occur systemically in the judiciary, we can make certain recommendations how to change the situation. And through these recommendations, we approved the concept of different amendments to the legislation on reoffenses and on the Article 68. It's reconciliation within the criminal process related cases. So we should react to such situations. And indeed, the current state of legislation should be able to meet the requirements and the criteria of justice and fairness in the public. Yeah, I'd like to add here as well. Of course, here, the task of the police to register the offense or the complaint from the public, to do the quick and responsive investigation, and to provide the quality materials to the prosecutor's office and to the court. And through doing this in a quality way, this fairness can be strengthened. Colleagues, here I also would like to share my thoughts. Indeed, this is a very relevant issue, a relevant question. The need, the requirement for justice is a common value, and it's felt by the public. It's by no accident that when discussion was about going about computerization, digitalization, that maybe all lawyers can be substituted by computers, or all judges can be substituted by the different digital products. Can it be possible if you put the database in, and will the computer give you the answer what the judicial decision should be? We can say that it's impossible because the public wants the fair decision. That's why we quite often say justice. If you take this word and look at its roots from Latin language, it means the fairness. And the formula that the world can vanish, but there should be justice staying, that there's always about the principle of justice crowning the whole process. The same with the Catholic language, the word adliat means justice, and reaching this fairness. So there's such thing as formal legality or lawfulness, and we should bring it closer to the ideas and understanding on what is just and what is fair. Thank you for your very good question. I think the answers of speakers, they answered your question. Yes, I want to also say that this is very relevant for courts, because the courts are that body that make these judicial decisions, and they are made in accordance with certain standards. 85% of all the cases are civil cases, basically. And there is a procedural code. Basically, these are the processes that rule how the process should, civil process should go. It's about how the judge can deal with a certain case, how deeply he can go into the case. We should understand that no one is reading and learning by heart the civil procedure code. Everyone has anyway his own understanding and belief of what is just and what is fair. And the judges would make their own decision from the point of common sense, from the point of public, and sometimes judge has his own rationale, and his rationale behind the decision is fair. The public may not understand why judge came up with such a decision. We should understand that judges have certain limitations. These limitations are the limitations set by the parties to the process. If the parties to the process are not sharing some information, the judge can't go beyond the limits of the provided materials. There's a provision that the judge can't play then an active role in requesting certain proof or evidences that are not already in the case materials, in the case files. And this is a great limitation. This week, I went to the business trip and was discussing this issue with English lawyers. They have more freedom in these matters. In their legislation, there is no limitation on how deeply the judge wants to study the case. In their system, judges define what should be done, and the main principle here is justice, that it's the basis for all the decisions made, and for them the public trust, public confidence is the pinnacle. And this shall be the focus of our further modernization. Thank you, Mr. Asanov. Again, one more short remark. I guess not everyone noticed that the president, in his latest addresses and speeches on legal issues, especially in strategic matters of strategic development of Kazakhstan, the president, he moved away from the previous terminology of the rule of law. He stopped saying rule of law as the law in legislation, but rule of the justice, and that's exactly what he means. And this is the requirement. This is the requirements of the Council of Europe and other legal institutions, international legal institutions. So I believe that this topic should be discussed at another conference where the issues and matters about rule of law, the justice and fairness should be discussed deeper. More questions from the audience. Mr. Gavin Slade, the professor of the Nazarbayev University. I'd like to ask my question in English.
How or from where you take different policies. So, for example, I'm very interested in the zero tolerance concept and policy and how you have implemented it here in Kazakhstan. If you compare it with zero tolerance policies in America, zero tolerance policies in Georgia, usually this drives up the prison population. In Kazakhstan, we see this relationship between the zero tolerance policy and this decrease in the prison population. So I'm interested in where you take some of these ideas and then how you actually implement them in Kazakhstan so that you have a different effect from in other countries where we see similar policies. Thank you.
It's a very good question, and the scholars are really interested in this correlation between the things, how it happened. You know that the practice and experience of New York was studied. It's a big city. The mayor made a decision that the zero tolerance should be to everything, starting from simple misdemeanors on the street and ending with grievous crimes. And the public understood this principle, and they were reporting on each and every violation, starting from not putting your garbage in the garbage bin. And the citizens, public were reporting. The police would go to the place and find the person and make their work there. So of course there was that fact. We started this practice, and we made a decision that yes, there should be zero tolerance to all the offenses. Because we understand that certain offenses were not paid attention by the public or by the police. So we were trying to raise awareness of the public that they should respond to such cases. You noted in a rightful way that Georgia made such principles active. And in their situation, they were dealing with the thieves in crime, in law. And in certain Georgia made a decision that maybe in other countries this category of people, they're not criminals, but still in Georgia these people, they were not individuals that were exceptional. The thieves in crime were criminals, and if they did even a simple misdemeanor, or they were again held responsible, held liable in the most strictest manner. And there was according to the case, each case individually, they would apply whether there should be a limitation of liberty, if there should be alternative sanction, non-custodial sanction. And in the areas, in the questions about going milder on the sentences, we started applying more alternative non-custodial sanction. That is why exactly prison population didn't grow up, didn't skyrocket. Here I also want to say that we say prison population reduction, but we didn't reduce the convicts or the ones who were found guilty. It's a different thing. The idea and the essence of the project on reducing the prison population is about the following 10 measures to reduce prison population. This is a bureaucratic sort of title for this project. The formula for this project is as follows. It's about the inmates, the ones who are in the prisons. And this formula sounds like this. You should deserve your own liberty, your own freedom. And there's certain 3 requirements. If you're behaving yourself, if you first of all, secondly, you should compensate the harm that you inflicted, and there should be no reoffense. Though if these 3 requirements are being met by the inmate, other mechanisms start working on substituting your sentence with a milder one by the early release, or maybe moving the person to the settlement. So these instruments started working more actively because of this project. So in general, the number of found guilty individuals, it didn't go down. We just started using more of alternative measures, and such measures as limiting the freedom, etc. But again, I am reiterating that the prison population is reducing because these people, inmates in prisons, they're behaving themselves better, they're changing better because they have stimuli. They are motivated now because they know what benefits would be from their better behavior and change of mindset. And again, my colleague already mentioned that usually people get imprisoned if they commit a very serious or serious crime, very grievous crimes, and a very small amount of people who committed some average crimes. And I want to say that about 25 people held liable for criminal offenses get imprisoned. In our history of criminal process, we had different numbers. There were certain times when 60% of all the defendants were imprisoned, 60%. The world practice is around numbers of 15, 20%. And when this project on reducing the prison population was launched and implemented, we noted that from time to time the CIS countries, some countries each year on an annual basis, some twice a year, once in 2 years, they make amnesty, and so once a year or once in 2 years they release the people. And it means that situation, the pattern is the same. They have the rapid drop of the prison population, and then in another 2 years this prison population goes up because the ones who were released following the amnesty, they see this, they don't understand really the benefits, and they don't change their mindsets why they were released, and they don't change as individuals. And that's why this project of reducing prison population, it didn't use the mechanism of amnesty.
However, at the same time, there is a more intense work of individual crime prevention, when every convict sentenced by imprisonment, or someone penalized by an alternative non-custodial measures, such individual has the right or entitled to challenge the decisions, submit a claim to court, and be granted a conditional or early release. Well, zero tolerance actually starts from the minor petty crimes. In Kazakhstan, more than 4 million administrative offenses have been committed in Kazakhstan per year. Well, it was chaotic, in fact. The digitalization helped us to reveal some of the problems: who commits, where, why, for what reasons, and what are the measures. And that impunity actually created this very perverse situation. However, digitalization has helped us understand who commits crime, why crime is committed. So the concept, when we say that every citizen of Kazakhstan has rights, but has also responsibilities and duties. If the government provides high service qualities, the citizen on his or her end must also respect the responsibilities before the state. So when we analyze this situation, we have revealed the obvious perpetrators, which limit some of the freedoms. If someone has administrative penalties, alimonies unpaid, or penalties unpaid, then such individual will not be allowed outside of Kazakhstan. So that process has helped us reduce the burden and the number of administrative offenses. Actually, now this year we have registered 1 million less administrative crimes than in the previous year. So first of all, it's a gradual work. It's following the rules that will then transform into a habit and a custom, and will eventually help change the mindset. Thank you very much. But I have a small comment. The president has already raised a number of times the zero tolerance policy to crime. I think the speakers have very clearly shown and demonstrated the difference between tightening the punishment and tightening the control over unlawful behavior. And inevitability of liability does not mean that the punishment is strengthened or is toughened, and Jack Kozhmash has demonstrated that. However, there is one more aspect that has been mentioned by the Minister of Interior, and that I would like to emphasize, is that some colleagues understand that inevitability and zero tolerance as synonyms. So kind of irreplaceable synonym words. So zero tolerance and inevitability. Truly, inevitability of liability is a very important component, but it does not exhaust all of it. Zero tolerance means that the society should be highly intolerant towards all the offenses, all the crimes. That's the area where we need to work hard, because the mindset of our people, the way we're thinking, whereas Kazakhstan, European state, or the United States, this mindset and thinking varies. Of course, we have this sense of elbow, or this kind of unity, that which is good. But what should one's reaction be when someone finds out that someone else has committed a crime? You know, we will have the derogatory statement, or informant, or sleazebag, or whatever. But the attitude will be totally different in the States, for instance. If someone, while driving, notices another driver breaking all the rules, disrespecting all the safety requirements, then such driver who observed it, will report it to police immediately, because he or she understands that that kind of behavior is dangerous, is threatful to himself, first of all. Whereas in our case, if an individual reports on his neighbor who's been evading taxes, he should understand that if someone evades taxes, that means more taxes for other people. And the society and the government are directly connected with that particular offense. So that zero tolerance notion is developed higher in some countries. And therefore, the task that has been given to us by the president to develop and to nurture zero tolerance. So whenever zero tolerance is raised, we kind of looked right away to at the Ministry of Interior. Yes, it is the main responsibility of the Ministry of Interior, but it demands and requires efforts of all involved, like Ministry of Education, maybe Ministry of Healthcare, or educational institutions. So I think it's one of the topics that needs to be studied and discussed further. Thank you. Let's ask two more questions, and then we have Rahim Ushakbayev over there and the Voronov, the defense lawyer. So, hello. Rahim Ushakbayev, Lab Center for Applied Studies. I have two questions. Kazakhstan, of course, is impressive in terms of humanizing the punishment and reducing prison population. That's all should be welcomed. However, the statistics on the crime committed by recidivists or like reoffenders is extremely high. So about 1/3 is committed by those who already committed crime. The murder and manslaughter, 38%. So it's 2 by 100,000, 102 by 1,000 people. Georgia, 2.1, and in Azerbaijan and in Georgia they have 1 per 1,100 people. So do you think there's a dilemma that inevitability of punishment is of course very important, but at the same time it's important to protect the society from the criminals who tend to demonstrate their criminal behavior? So do we need to have a tougher control over those who have already been convicted? Secondly, I of course welcome this introduction of the single registry of crimes, and I'm sure that all the crimes must be registered. That probably has led to increased number of misdemeanors and offenses. So we kind of gave up the linear system, and now what kind of KPI should be used in the Ministry of Interior? Can we get Natalia Ivanovich Voronov ask a question, and we ask the speakers take all three questions in the interest of time for the speakers to think about the questions? Thank you. So my question is as follows, that has to do with the topic of today's event and the future of criminal justice and change management. And I have a question for the chairman of the Supreme Court, although it might be a question for the legislators as well. So, distinguished Representative, the defense lawyers and human rights activists, should we expect change in criminal proceedings in terms of improving access to justice in the Supreme Court? I mean, well, what I'm implying, what I'm referring to, is the sort of non-constitutional procedure, the constitutional assessment of complaints single-handedly by the Supreme Court judges single-handedly. But just one judge is not a justice, is not a panel of justices. So I think, will that change? That was my question. And secondly, can we expect change in terms of ensuring independence of judges from unprocedural intervention of the higher instance courts judges? Oftentimes the judges, because they are scared that their decisions will not be upheld, have to consult with their superior kind of instance judges whether their decisions are encouraged and will be supported. Thank you. There are 4 questions, so where shall we start? Thank you. Yes, we do have a trend of increased manslaughter and murder, and the majority happen in the family, kind of in the context of domestic violence. So on family domestic relationship, we had the growth of crime by 26%, and I would like to say that we have really studied all the aspects of these crimes, and last year have introduced changes to the law. In 2015, we have changed the law that battery and domestic violence is a criminal misdemeanor, and all the battery that happens in a family during a conflict, and one of the husbands is intoxicated, then that will be usually handled by constables. Such individuals, those who have been beating, the abusers would have been apprehended and arrested, and administrative offense would be applied. And as a result, the spouses would have resolved it somehow amicably. But since we have introduced this crime, like battery, into the criminal misdemeanor, so we can no longer just simply take the materials to court and arrest a person for the administrative offense. So we would have like 3 or 4 hours, and we would offer them to go to court. So the conflict would continue, and last year we had the growth of domestic killings and murders, and this year this trend continues. That's why we have that is exactly why we have changed the law. We have taken all of these offenses back to the Code of Administrative Offenses, and I think this trend will decline. So most of the murders happen inside the family. That's according to statistics. As for the registry, so the decision that we have taken to register all the crimes, it was a huge step forward, because we have the control, accountability, statistics. While we know how our subordinates handle such crimes, we can track everything electronically. Also, claimants can track the status of their complaints. So I think it was a very good progress, and we will strengthen, deepen it, and we will improve it further. Thank you. I think the very first question, I think we can expect that this question was discussed by the Supreme Court justices. We all have concluded and agreed, I'm talking about the Criminal Justices Panel, that we should give up the single-handed deliberations by a Supreme Court justice over criminal code at a cassational instances. So there has to be a panel of 3 judges. I believe that this provision will be introduced, provided legislators support us. As for the other thing, yes, I mean, as for this hierarchy and this kind of approval thing, they do have all the instruments. They have so-called presidiums through which the sanctioning of a particular measure can be initiated. That is why we are now considering canceling or abolishing those instruments, such as presidiums. And now, these days, we demand the judges to take independent decisions, kind of independent and sovereign decisions, so that every judge will now be responsible purely for his or her rulings. We need to make sure that independence of judges is not compromised. Clearly, we cannot penalize them for judicial mistakes, but the liability of a judge can be challenged only in case of serious, obvious, and significant errors and mistakes. The judges should be protected against all the chairpersons, including the chairperson of the Supreme Court. That is why the judicial jury are part of the Supreme Court. We suggest that it will be handed over to the Supreme Judicial Council, and the judicial jury should incorporate both acting effective judges who at the same time do not report to the chairman of the Supreme Court. So there will be a number of steps that will aim to ensure independence and sovereignty of the judges. We are open, and you can always send your recommendations to our email, and we will of course consider them gladly. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, distinguished colleagues, with this we seem to be respecting over the timeline with only 2-minute delay. I asked the speakers not to leave their chairs, to stay in the chairs for a few minutes, and we will have a group photo, and then we'll let you go. So I think we have had a very fruitful discussion, especially the last question was extremely important. How to create this legal elite, which we need really, which we need to make sure that only the best are filtered in and the worst are filtered out. What are the criteria? What are the methods of selection? Of course, I wish we also had a chance to hear. Can I give you just a few numbers, and I think the picture will become very clear. Currently, the Supreme Judicial Council is changing the selection procedure entirely at full. So we have now two flows of competition, of enrollment. 80 persons have applied and only 3 have been selected. The second wave of hiring, 60 people have applied, only 2 have been selected, and the third one has filed for appeal. So every 20 only gets selected, and it's all backed by very scrupulous, meticulous work of the Supreme Court. Well, amazing quotes. Thank you very much. Once I had a chance to read some thoughts of genetics, who spoke about elite groups of seed, animals, including this elite social group. These are the groups where we have the best people, and I think the Supreme Judicial Council is handling it pretty well, and the pool of judges are the best. However, there is a second part to make sure that the worst are pushed out. Now, what is the mechanism for excluding the worst? That is the biggest issue that we have. And that is not an easy challenge, I must say, to make sure that they leave the group, but at the same time that independence and sovereignty of judges is not undermined, is not compromised. We need to make sure that the judge is not afraid of neither chairman of the Presidium nor the Supreme Court chairman and the High Judicial Council. So we need to make sure that the judge is entirely independent and had the inner sense of justice. I think that's a separate topic where we need the help from our European friends. So, in conclusion, I would like to thank our European colleagues, everyone who worked in the project office. The project was extremely useful, was extremely important for our country, and I would also like to say the following. The modernization process of the legal system in general and of the law enforcement system and activity in particular continues, because sky is the limit when it comes to perfection, and also because there are new challenges that life brings our way. And we would be very grateful to our colleagues, European Council, Council of Europe, European Union, Council of Europe, if they could come up with new forms, new projects that could help us in terms of informational support and get access to the best international practice for our further progress. And there are a couple of words, something I should have been done at the very beginning. So why am I here? The chairman of the first foundation of Nursultan Nazarbayev, Yelbasi. So the thing is that the fund of the first president, Yelbasi, has been actually investing heavily in development of creative youth and scientific activities and so on and so forth. But actually lately, a lot of attention has been paid to legal issues. So we, on one hand, on our side, are ready to contribute to this process. We're ready to support and be the part of discussion. And actually, from the representative of the Venice Commission, we have already heard some recommendations, and we have arrived to a certain consensus that the foundation will act as a moderator. Well, I like this role today, so we could act as a moderator, as an interlocutor of achieving the consensus between public authorities, law enforcement structures. So we are ready to cooperate further, and we call on all of you to expand, to deepen this cooperation and continue our work. And there are lots of topics. The forthcoming anniversary of the Universal Human Rights Declaration, as well as achievement of the tasks that have been given to us by the head of state. Thank you very much, and now I'd like to give the floor to Saulia.
Thank you a lot. Of course, we'd like to express gratitude to all the reformers here present on the panel session. Our team was thinking about how we will make the conclusions of this project and this conference, and we thought that these reforms, they happen not because they're just really good, strong leadership, but also because they're very good executors, implementers of such change. And it will be wrong not mention a couple of names from these colleagues, from the implementers. We prepared special letters of gratitude, of appreciation to the members of these state agencies, the stakeholders, who really helped us in implementing the change jointly with you. We will not be able to mention everyone. We'll mention just a couple of them. First, I'd like to start from the Supreme Court. Here, our partners were Yerbul Zhumabayevich, Umrali, Bolat Kalembekov, Asya Kasyanovna, and over 20 other members of Supreme Court. In the GPO, would like to mention many others. The change agents, they came here today from across the country. Marat Abishev, Tulibayev, Murat, it's the heads of PMO, Ilyas Aybar, Kozhamkulov Murat, the member who actually passed through the new HR selection system, Munira Bisenova, the MOI. We need to mention Mr. Darmenov Akankali, Satmursin Sakumjan, Juana Shahmetov, Kasimova Mayra, the LSC, of course, it's the head of LSC Legal Status Committee, Dmitry Moon, who worked with us for a very long time, and in the quiz in the penal committee quiz, it's Alexander Terenya, Aigulis Kakova, and from two academies, it's a head leadership of these two academies, law enforcement academies. I would like to mention Shakir Shaykhmetov and others. This is just a very small list of names that I mentioned. There are many, many more that we wanted to thank on behalf of our EUCJ project, because all these changes that we mentioned there were done by the hands and minds of these people. So thank you a lot. And we need to mention and thank the big team of interns. It's the students from different universities, usually most of them are Nazarbayev University, Eurasian National University, Kazgu University. It's a big team of young interns, young students who had a great chance to go through this experience and interact with more expert community. I also would like to thank Mr. Rogov for his co-moderation with me and bringing this great contribution to this conference. I also want to thank the Minister of Justice. Minister of Justice attended this conference, but he had to leave a bit earlier because he has another meeting after. I also would like to thank the chairman of the High Judicial Council, Mr. Danakov. We also worked with them. And also we expressing gratitude to all the members of parliament with whom we conducted many, many different events. They were supporting us, they were listening to us, listening to our recommendations, expert opinions, and others. I also want to thank Svetlana Fedorovna, Nurlan Majitovich. You always attend, and all the conference we make, and all the other agencies and committees that supported our work. We also want to thank the team of colleagues who made this event possible. And I believe that this is not the final big project that was implemented in Kazakhstan, not the last successful project that was done in criminal justice. And we really hope that much, much quicker, maybe not in 10 years, but in 5 years, among these reformers, there will be many more women on this panel session. It's only me alone, and I'm not even among the reformers yet. So we hope that there will be many, many more good reforms that we'll be proud of and will be proudly sharing the results of which. Thank you all, dear participants. Now we would like to ask the main speakers to stay on this scene and make one big group photo with all the experts and all the ones who want to be in this photo. Thank you.